mean, I very much agree with everything that Noel, Stephen, and Samuel have said. There's nothing that I strongly disagree with. I suppose as an opening point, I think it is interesting that the P5 in general are relatively united on Yemen in a way which they certainly aren't in Syria and Libya. And occasionally we've managed to make use of that. There is a difference of opinion over Iran, particularly the sort of, I mean, I think there have been attempts over the years, particularly by the Americans, to sort of try and pin more of the blame on Iran publicly and in the UN and so on, which have been resisted by the Russians and Chinese. But by and large, the meetings that I've been to with Martin Griffiths over the years, with P5 ambassadors, we've been violently agreeing with each other on most things. And, you know, particularly in like, you know, Vladimir and I agreed very much, which I think is probably unusual in terms of foreign policy issues at the moment for the UK and Russia to be in such agreement. So I think that is interesting and is at some point could be useful when the time is right, which I don't think it is at the moment, to try and sort of bring things to a head, some sort of peace moves, as it were, if it's about convening and so on. And it was useful in Stockholm, I think, as we can argue about whether Stockholm was a good result, but I think that the role of the P5 was instrumental, was important in supporting Martin Griffiths' efforts to bring about an agreement. So that's the first thing. Specifically on the UK, just because I think it is certainly in my time, which is since the last 3 and a bit years, it's been very much looked at through a prism of Saudi Arabia, and even more than CT. I think, in fact, on the CT side, some people are worried that, well, some people think that the continuation of the war is probably not a bad thing from a narrow CT point of view, in the sense that Yemen is not an international source of terrorism at the moment because of the war. And there have even been people who've said, "Oh, we've got to be a bit careful about bringing about working towards peace, because in the context of peace, as Noel suggests, it's quite possible you'd see a resurgence of either AQAP or Daesh." I mean, I don't think that's serious, but it's not completely irrelevant. But certainly, it isn't at the moment looked at in a CT context at all. It is looked at in terms of regional security and our relationship with Saudi Arabia. I think in terms of our relationship with Saudi Arabia, I think it has been, despite what people might say, it's great that we go on selling them weapons, and therefore we would obviously want to continue the war so that we can make more money from selling them weapons. I think that is, it's an interesting debating point. It's totally false in practice, because I think our very strong view is that it is massively in Saudi Arabia's interests to end the war for Saudi Arabia and regional security. And therefore, I would say that the bulk of efforts over the last few years have been to try and help Saudi Arabia, first of all, to persuade Saudi Arabia that they did want to end the war as quickly as possible. And then post-September 19, with the Abqaiq attack, when I think, at which point my view is that MBS realized that the war was very much against Saudi interests. The continuation of the war was very damaging for Saudi Arabia, because it had enabled Iran to make an attack on Saudi Arabia's critical oil infrastructure and get away with it. Astonishingly, really, when you think about it, that they were able to lob missiles straight into the middle of Saudi Arabia's oil infrastructure and suffer no consequences whatsoever, because the obfuscation of the Houthi pretending to be responsible for it and so on. So since September 19, I think the Saudis, as Noel said, have wanted to end this. They haven't quite. I think there was a period in the autumn of 19, beginning of 20, when there were direct discussions between the Saudis and the Houthis, where if the Saudis had, as Noel says, a bit more, a bit better understanding of where the Houthis were coming from, a bit more people to put into the frame, that if they had really made an effort to be brave and go beyond the comfort of their discussions they were having with the Houthis, that they could have got a deal then, which they're prepared to sign up to now, but which the Houthis have moved on from. the Houthis have moved on in the last 2 years to extend their, whereas then I think the Houthis would have taken an end to the so-called blockade and a ceasefire and so on. I think the Houthis were ready at that point and would have signed up to it. Now they want much more withdrawal of foreign forces and so on. So the Houthis have moved the goalposts, but it was a failure. It was an inability to conclude a deal back at the end of 19, early 20, before the Maghreb attack started and so on, which I think was a very narrow opportunity. And I'm not blaming anybody for it really, but I think that was the closest we've come to an opportunity to end the fighting. As far as the UK is concerned, we will continue to try and encourage and so on, we see that and work with Saudi Arabia in the sense that we do see them very much as it being in their interest. They are the players, they have levers, they have influence. And I mean, we can come and probably discuss this more in subsequent, the other questions, but I do think Afghanistan has had will have had a major impact, probably on all sides. But the Saudis will certainly look at it and think, would we do what the Americans have done? To copy what the Americans have done in Afghanistan, i.e., to have a limited withdrawal, as it were, would be, is not. They'll be very, very nervous about doing it. Just as the Houthis will be sitting there thinking, we are the Taliban. Let's just wait until everybody basically gives up and hands over power to us. So I think that Afghanistan, but let's save that discussion for subsequently.